Unpacking your ecosystem through facilitation. This video will describe how to facilitate a group discussion to unpack your local ecosystem. Unpacking an ecosystem in a group exercise will help social entrepreneurs and organizations identify all of the players and environmental conditions along with the relationships between them. The product of this exercise will help your organization make effective strategic decisions. You should be keenly familiar with the concept of an ecosystem before using this method for that purpose. If you are new to the field of development or need a refresher on what an ecosystem is, then please watch How to Nurture a High-Functioning Ecosystem for an in-depth explanation of what ecosystems are. Before we explain the exercise, we will first answer the following questions. What is the facilitator and facilitation method anyway? Why are facilitation methods particularly valuable for ecosystem mapping? As a facilitator, you should never initiate an exercise without a clear and in-depth understanding of what the participants are trying to accomplish. It is the facilitator's key responsibility to create a group process and an environment in which it can flourish. Remember, you are not teaching, but facilitating while paying attention to what the group says, where the consensus is, and where there are differences. There are a multitude of methods to choose from. Deciding which method to use depends on a number of factors to include if the session is an open discussion or structured process, the number of participants, the nature of the topic under discussion, the type of involvement people need to have, the background and position of the participants, how well they know the subject and each other, and available time. Using facilitation methods for ecosystem mapping is valuable because it creates a deeper understanding of the ecosystem in which the organization operates. Additionally, it facilitates organizational process, improves the way players communicate, and creates new partnerships, connections, and collaborations. The idea behind facilitating to map an ecosystem is not to draw the map per se. It's deep conversations that lead to decisions, that lead to actions, that lead to continuous improvement. This facilitation exercise is an easy and fast way to bring out everyone's opinion and ideas without getting bogged down in a heavy lecture or convoluted discussion. It is a great method to help answer the following questions about an ecosystem. What information was the same? What was different, and how do you explain the differences? Why is it that one group captured X and one group captured Y? How do you explain the differences in perspective? Depending on the group size, this exercise will usually take on average of 60 to 90 minutes. Event size can range from 5 to 40 people, but ensure no more than 4 to 5 in a group. Bring copies of an example ecosystem which we've provided as a link below. Also bring tape, a small poster-sized paper for each group or individual, and colored markers. The focus of this session is for participants to improve their interactions and understanding of their complexity of mapping an ecosystem. This activity will revolve around specific questions based on the 5 R's approach. The focus of this session is for participants to improve their interactions and understanding of their complexity by mapping an ecosystem. This activity will revolve around specific questions based on the 5 R's approach. It is an approach of making sense of local systems by focusing attention on resources, roles, relationships, rules, and results. Based on this approach, the participants have to answer the following research questions. Who are the players in their context? What resources does the organization have? What issues are the most common and risky in their organization? What are the roles of each participant? What are the interactions and relationships between the players? What is actually happening in the organization internally? What is actually happening in their context externally? The overall process of this facilitation method is as follows. Orient the group to the purpose of the event, which in this case is to define aspects of an ecosystem that will include the perspective of all members. This will usually take 5 minutes. Explain how the exercise will capture the 5 R's in the map. This will usually take about 10 minutes. Have groups create an ecosystem map by working in small groups. This will usually take about 30 minutes. Have groups travel to see all other maps and engage in conversation for about 3 minutes per station. Full group discussion, which usually will take about 30 minutes. How do you facilitate this session? Let's say there are 5 groups in a large room. You will hand out the example ecosystem and explain how the 5 R's are represented in the map. You will go through what the example depicts, and then you will ask each group to draw their ecosystem. Note, be sure to tell them to draw their actual ecosystem as literally as possible, otherwise they may start drawing a metaphor. After 30 minutes, have each group move around the room, spending about 3 minutes per station, and engage in conversation. However, instruct one person to stay stationary in front of their ecosystem map. We call this person the curator. Ask the curator to synthesize the feedback from each round in their ecosystem map. Once everyone has been to each group, then reconvene and have a full group discussion about what they saw. Start a synthesis ecosystem map and update as you progress through the discussion, uncovering various perspectives of each ecosystem. As the facilitator, you must be sure that you are able to capture the diversity of the various ecosystems. Specifically, you must ensure the differences, the perspectives, and the actors that seem to be higher and lower priority are realized, because they may not emerge from the group conversation. For example, you can ask a question such as, "Looks like Group 2 in particular chose to place X in a very prominent role, but that wasn't true for Group 3 and 4. The purpose of the group discussion is to start deep conversations on what people saw, where there was consensus around the 5 R's, where the gaps were, where there were differences, and why those differences occurred. Discussing differences helps ideas emerge and unpacks multiple perspectives to generate conversation on who actors are, how they relate to each other, and who is particularly underutilized and overstretched. Debriefing questions would include, why do you think these differences emerged? In general, differences come with experiences, so there are parts of the ecosystem that individuals or organizations don't interact with, so they don't see them and therefore are unaware of them. For example, within an organization, an individual may only see the environment through the lens of his role, so they may not be aware of everything outside that role. The point is to discuss why we are not seeing certain pieces or why we are focusing on other pieces, which have to do with our lived experiences and implicitly what is important to us. Now that we have this synthesis map, we can ask the following questions. What does it tell us? What do we do next? Where do we focus our energy? Where do we focus our resources? What are some opportunities that we see in this map? As a recap, the overall process of this facilitation exercise is as follows. Orient the group to the purpose of the event, which in this case is to define aspects of an ecosystem that will include the perspective of all members. That will usually take about 5 minutes. Explain how the exercise will capture the 5 R's in the map, which will usually take about 10 minutes. Have groups create an ecosystem map by working in small groups, which will usually last for about 30 minutes. Have groups travel to see all other maps and engage in conversation, about 3 minutes per station. And then engage in full group discussion for about 30 minutes.